Spring football may be complete, but the transfer portal continues to churn for Auburn football. We're going to talk about the latest transfer for the Tigers, the sixth out of the spring so far. Let's talk about who this is and, of course, what it means for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. War Eagle Auburn family and a special War Eagle, and welcome to those of you that consider yourselves part of the E2C Network family, the best little family within the Auburn family. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're live, whether you're on the replay, however you got here, whenever you got here. We appreciate you being here and hanging out with us to talk about this topic today, a live stream reaction show about a commitment that came actually last, night, afternoon, late afternoon, for the Auburn football team. Was not one that garnered a lot of attention last night. In fact, it slipped right under my radar, and there hasn't even been a lot of reporting on it right at this point. But it's still something worth talking about. It's something worth discussing because we need to stay on top of what's churning in the transfer portal for Auburn football, and of course, what the roster implications are for Auburn football. Your newest addition is Antoine Fegans, who is coming to us from Northwestern State football from Louisiana, and also by way of Arkansas State previously before that. He comes in as a defensive back with approximately 3 years of eligibility left to play. Most people would presume that he continues to play a safety position. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We want to dive into some facts, some stats, things to know about Mr. Antwon Fegans. And of course, there is one big storyline that I think if you are a recruiting junkie, you already know the big implications about it in relation to him and his name. We will get there. Hold on to your horses just for a second. But let's dive into all these things. And of course, we're going to talk about what it means for the transfer portal, the recruiting process, the class thus far, what it could mean for playing time, things like that. All that's included in our very brief reaction stream here right now. Antoine Fagans, obviously very happy that we're continuing to fill needs that have been openly addressed and discussed by Hugh Freeze. And we've seen him do that with a defensive line. We've seen them do that by bringing in a top tier wide receiver. Other areas have already been addressed. An offensive lineman has been brought in the last week. But this is one area where you have lost some numbers, and maybe not surprisingly is the word, because it's the transfer portal era. Nothing should surprise you anymore. But it shouldn't surprise you when you lose somebody that you go out and find someone that maybe fits your needs currently, but also could help you for needs down the line as well. So if you guys have thoughts about Mr. Antoine Fagans, obviously, please do share them in the chat. If you're watching live, you can also do that on the replay in the comment section, and we'll address those as appropriate. And we appreciate you, those of you that are dropping in with us live right now. All right, so Mr. Fagans, Antwon Fegans, you're going to find, actually, I went to go look up his information on Northwestern State. They already have pulled that down so quick. There's a 404 page, which basically means they removed it. But he started his career at Arkansas State. We'll just talk about last year because that's the only thing that I can find that I feel comfortable talking about here in terms of stats for him at Northwestern State. He had 6 total tackles, 4 of those solo, 2 assisted, and that is pretty much the majority of his stats. I think he played in a total of about 5 games last year. If I'm looking at this correctly, he's been in college football for a while, so I don't know if there's been injury issues or things like that, and still 3 years of eligibility. He's probably one of those lone few ones that still has some type of COVID year that they can still utilize. I know we all thought that this year was going to be the year we said goodbye to all of that, but we're still here talking about the COVID years. Coming in as a defensive back, his measurables listed on ESPN. We'll just go off of those and assume that they are at least approximately correct. 6'1", 195 pounds. So when you think about that, it does seem to indicate that he will be more of a safety type of player for Auburn, and that is what he was listed at other places before this. Doesn't mean that he wouldn't slide into a different role, such as a star position like that on the defensive back front, but probably would see him there, but more likely safety, not necessarily. Cornerbacks tend to be, I hate to say it, but tend to be a little bit shorter, a little bit like smaller because they need to move a little quicker as they're standing out there on the boundaries with these very fast, very agile first and second wide receivers for a lot of these teams. And your safeties love to come up and just crack ahead sometimes. So Antoine Fegans coming into the mix and being part of this team for the 2024 season. Happy to have him, and happy to have someone who will likely provide depth. So let's just be upfront about that. And I think you can see the level of noise that was made yesterday and how it kind of slipped under a lot of people's radar, that this isn't someone that a lot of people are just like raving about. That shouldn't tell you that he's not going to be a valuable part of this team in this depth chart. But I think it does show you that he is coming in and probably understands that he is a depth piece at this point. It's the guy taking a step up, Arkansas State, Northwestern State, now up to Auburn. He's got a long road ahead of him in terms of finding significant playing time. Doesn't mean that he won't play right away. So I would estimate that you're probably going to see him a lot on special teams, but you may see him rotating in a lot just to help with the depth this year as we continue to transition around in the transfer portal era. What is the big storyline around him? And this is the big one. Let me just address it right off at the top. And I think I have the relation correct. I believe he is the brother of Antwon Fegans. There is some relation there. I'm pretty sure. I'm 99% sure. I had this brought up to me yesterday about there being some relation there. Why is that significant? That is someone in the 2025 cycle that Auburn is heavily pursuing and wanting to have as part of their team for that class of 2025. And so it would stand to reason that the relation is there. Obviously, you'd like to come play with him at Auburn too. It doesn't hurt your case to have a family member playing at Auburn. We've seen Auburn do this in a variety of different positions. The Carlsons at kicker came together. The Browns, Derek and Cameron, came together. We have seen Marcus Harris and now Malik Blockton, who they're not playing together, but it could be stand to reason that Malik came to be at Auburn this year because Marcus Harris was here, or at least that really helped in the process. So I would say that if you're Auburn, and if we're Auburn fans, we'd be stupid to ignore the implications there, that having a relative here at Auburn could potentially help you bring in someone like Anquan to be part of future class if you have a relative here currently. So don't want to mince words and don't want to act like that's not part of the equation. I knew that's what most of you were thinking of at the very top when you tune into this show, when you watch the replay about that. So there are some of your stats, facts, and storylines to keep in mind about what we're thinking about at this moment. But let's look a little bit about what it means for the roster, the depth chart. We've kind of answered a lot of that. We don't necessarily expect him to pop into a starting position or even, a second string right away. Although this is a guy that's been in football for a while and college football for a while. So you can't take that away from him, and it holds a little bit of water in terms of that. If you look at who Auburn has lost in the transfer portal recently, they have lost a Colton Hood. That's a cornerback, though. JD Rim's been gone for a while, but that was also a cornerback. He finally transferred somewhere else. Those are the two most recent ones, unless I'm forgetting somebody, that have left. So that's not necessarily meaning that Antoine is coming in to take over those spots, because it's two other positions, safety to cornerback. But you still have defensive back positions. You also have to look at who Auburn has brought in maybe behind those guys to play cornerback position, and kind of vacated some spots for another defensive back spot, at least in theory. So that could be part of the equation here. We know that we needed some more defensive backs and defensive back depth. Antoine is obviously the candidate for one of those spots. Will there be more? I don't know. There were two defensive back spots vacated in recent time, but I would imagine you could effectively just say this is the replacement for Colton Hood's spot, even without them being the exact positions. If you look at safety right now at Auburn, the presumed safeties to keep an eye on are going to be Jaron Thompson, the Texas transfer, Laquan Robinson, also a transfer coming in this past cycle. You've got also names like Caleb Wooden, Sylvester Smith, Caleb Harris that are going to be factoring into that. The star position as well has got Champ Anthony, Terrence Love. Maybe he could factor in there as well. So I see enough prominent names there that I don't see him cracking the starting lineup anytime soon. But he could probably find himself in a position to compete for some playing time even early on. So those are some initial stats, things, measurables, things to keep in mind about him, some implications about what it means for Auburn. And let me cover that last part. What does it mean for the rest of the cycle? We already talked about that. He kind of effectively fills that opened up spot by Colton Hood. Maybe there's some more out there that are available, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of chatter around that right now. When you think the transfer portal is done, folks, it just never is. That's why it caught us all off guard yesterday. So always keep that in mind that when we say we think we might be done, just remember what Trevon Reed used to say. We ain't done yet. So stats, facts, storylines, implications for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers about recruiting, depth chart, all of that we covered here in a very quick live stream about Mr. Antoine Fagans and his impact on the team this year, but maybe in coming years as well. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, hanging out with me, and spending some time being a part of our little family within the Auburn family and talking about this latest transfer commitment for 2024. Till I talk to you again, War Eagle.